absolutely incredible. And you look at him, look at that face. He has given it absolutely everything that he had today.
This right here is what it takes to win a top level professional triathlon these days. Absolutely everything. This right here is Yuri Kulon, and he ripped up the pre-race scripts of this insanely hot T100 Singapore race. He went so all out to take the win that he collapsed after the finish line and was taken to the hospital. Thankfully, he was okay, but he shocked everyone because he's not supposed to be winning these races. He's actually a wild card athlete because he was just outside of the rankings required to get a spot on this T100 tour. But thankfully for him, the T100 offers these wild card spots, and he got one in Miami and pulled off an impressive 4th place result there, which meant he got another wild card spot for this race in Singapore. He put everything into preparing for it. And well, we just saw what happened. But it means he moves into the #1 spot of the T100 series so far. And it means a wild card could potentially win this whole thing, which would be absolutely insane. He clearly deserves a spot and has the heart of somebody willing to do whatever it takes. He quoted the #1 ranked triathlete in the world right now, Christian Blumenfeld, after the race in the hospital, saying it hurts more to lose, which is saying a lot considering how tough it looked to race this race. I mean, it was absolute carnage, and it was one of my favorite races to watch ever. The course was incredible. The heat and humidity was insane. There were so many position changes. 4 men pulled out, and it was seriously so unpredictable that you had no idea what was going to happen at every moment. And that's what makes triathlon so special and fun to watch. So let's dive into how Yuri pulled off one of the greatest upsets. And by the way, right at the end, it almost looked like it was all going to be taken away from him.
This world, what we're seeing here from Yuri Kulon. Oh, eyes up, eyes up.
Wow.
Whew, and we'll get to that on the run. But starting off in the swim, Yuri had the orange cap and the bluish red arms and a neon stripe on his swim skin, so keep an eye out for him. Josh Amberger started the race off hot, pushing the pace, and Sam Laidlow ended up in no man's land, which could have changed the entire race for Yuri because Yuri started next to Sam Laidlow on the pontoon, and if he'd have followed Sam, he might not have been able to get back to the main group like Sam was, because Sam happens to be one of the best swimmers in the sport, where Yuri is just a little bit off of that and might not have had the capacity to do so. So Yuri ended up staying with the main pack and getting in the perfect spot, drafting behind a couple of athletes at times, and managed to be in that top 10. At the Aussie exit about halfway through the swim, Yuri was right there with no cap, but still about 8th out of the water, and then Aaron Royal went to the front and began to push the pace. He was clearly making a move to try and split up this front group and get a gap going out onto the bike, but Yuri just barely managed to hang on. It looked like he just lost touch, but it wasn't enough for it to be significant. And with a great transition, including putting some ice down his back of his tri-suit, he was able to be right there in that front group heading out onto the bike. Also, Daniel Baekkegard, who's one of the best cyclists in the field, it looked like something happened to him in transition, not quite sure, which meant that Yuri was able to at least be around him, which meant he had a great person to work with to get back to that front, where he was just a few seconds behind. But you can clearly see from this first transition how dialed Yuri was, thinking about the ice down the shirt, getting a perfect flying mount onto the bike, which got him ahead of Baekkegard, and now he was in a position to stay with this front group. But nobody could have expected what was going to happen next on the bike. But then Sam Long came out of the water 4 minutes down off the front, which was surprising that he didn't improve on that swim time at all. He did say he didn't want to cook himself early on the swim, and I think this year he had a bit of advantage having the experience being so far down from last year that he knew exactly what he had to do, and he knew he was going to be on his own for a while. But to be honest, it didn't take long for him to get back into this race. However, Sam in the first transition had the opposite experience of Yuri because he picked up a penalty for not putting his swim skin in the transition box. So he had a 30-second penalty because of that, but he didn't know about it, which was probably to his advantage, and he just motored on the bike and eventually would end up being Yuri's closest competitor. But back to Yuri, and he was just a machine on the up and down hills and was just catching one person after another. My original thought while I was watching it was that he just didn't care what the group dynamic was and was just riding his own race. It seemed like some of these guys in the front group were a bit caught up with tactics and positions and people taking turns, and Youri just didn't care. Sam Laidlow led for the first bit, and he's the Ironman world champion. He's such a good cyclist, but you know what? Youri was just gaining and closing that gap and taking one person at a time. Then Kyle Smith and Mika Newt went to the front, and Braden Curry's been saying that Kyle Smith's in the form of his life, and Kyle's always been at the front of these races pushing the pace. But surprisingly, Jason West and Aaron Royal were also hanging in there to this front group. Jason West, even for a time, was ahead of Alistair Brownlee. And then at 1 hour into the race, the big moment came because he perfectly timed an attack up the hill. It looked like Sam Laidlow was about to take another turn at the front of the race, which actually was, I think, the decisive thing here, because Sam, after the race, after he pulled out, said he was unable to keep food down at this point and was really struggling. And so if he was the one that was heading to the front to take a turn, he probably slowed up this entire group right as Youri made an attack. And it just couldn't have worked out any better. Alistair Brownlee was a little bit further at this time and was unable to respond, and Youri just charged away and quickly picked up a sizable gap. And I also think this caught everybody by surprise, and nobody expected him to stay away because Youri is not known as the best cyclist in this sport. However, he was confident in this race, saying to a couple of people closest to him that he was going to win and he was going to fly on his new bike from a new sponsor, Pinarello, and he was making them proud in this moment. Even Alistair Brownlee tried to catch him after he got around the other athletes, but couldn't make a dent into him. And it's worth noting here as well that oftentimes motorbikes can interfere at the front of the races, but they were positioned really well. I have to give a kudos to the race organizers here. So Yuri Kulon kept opening up the gap. Brownlee fell back into the group. Peter Hemrick found another gear later on and pushed to the front of the race and tried to close that gap, but was unable as well. While Jason West and Daniel Baekegaard had lost touch and were beginning to lose a lot of time. So Youri just kept pushing and pushing until the gap had grown to over a minute. He kept looking over his shoulder, probably bewildered as to why there was nobody with him, nobody catching up to him. And yeah, it just kept working out for him. He'd been training in Phuket in Thailand leading up to this race. He said he'd spent a lot of his budget to go there, but he'd brought over his coach with him, and they were leaving no stone unturned. And actually, before the T100 series even began, Youri was preparing so hard for it just in case he got the call up. He got a specific swim coach. He even working with a psychologist. He was doing absolutely everything he could to be ready for if he was given the opportunity, and it was paying dividends. But back to the race, and Sam Long was absolutely charging. He was taking one person after another, those who had swam 2-3 minutes faster than he did, even going by Frederick Funk as if he was standing still. He's considered one of the best cyclists in the sport, but Sam Long was just on a different level and performs so well in the heat, clearly having another special day just a week after racing Oceanside 70.3 in the States. It was truly mind-blowing to watch. However, it looked like he should have been catching up to the front, but he wasn't, because Youri was riding about the same speed as Sam, and they would end up with pretty much the exact same bike split, which, by the way, was about 4 minutes faster than what Christian Blumenfeld rode last year. Clearly, the pace was on the bike, and these athletes weren't conserving anything for the run, and we would see some of that unfold later on. But Youri came into transition 1:15 up on the likes of Kyle Smith, Mika Newt, Alistair Brownlee, Kasper Stepaniak, and Peter Hemrick. Youri looked completely fine coming out of transition, and he was flying to start the run. Now, this is where a lot of the drama began, because Alistair Brownlee, when he was dismounting his bike, went a little bit too far and actually stepped on the dismount line, which resulted in a 30-second penalty, which he didn't realize as well at the time like Sam Long. But it was also a double whammy because in the process, he injured his ankle, which would later come back to haunt him. Finally, Sam Long would fly into transition, still 3 minutes and 30 seconds back. He still also had that penalty to serve, which he didn't know about, but thankfully he saved some time by not putting on socks in transition, and he looked the best heading out. This man is just insane in the heat. I'll say it again. It seems to make him even stronger. But 3 minutes and 30 seconds back, that was going to be a tall order. Fred Funk and Aaron Royal came in after him, and I thought those two might be able to do something together, but it wasn't to be the case. Now, Kyle Smith ran up to Mika Nu, and it was those two chasing Youri at first. And keep in mind, this meant that it was 3 wild cards leading at the front of the race, which just added to the drama. Surely these guys have secured permanent spots in the tour now. I just feel like you have to give them a wild card, because if they're not there, I think we're all going to miss them and wonder what they would have done. Now, Alistair Brownlee was a little bit further back than them, but he was gaining slowly but surely and eventually caught up to them. Peter Hemrick was also having a steady, smart run and was catching them slowly, but Alistair seemed the best of the rest until we were robbed once again of what could have been, because he pulled up because of that ankle injury right at an aid station, tried to stretch it out, but it wasn't to be. Now, what's a little bit telling here is that Alistair looked like he wasn't even breathing hard, looked like he was nose breathing while he was trying to stretch out his ankle, so it seemed like there was a lot left in the tank. And once again, we'll just have to wait and see what he could do in one of these races. But back to Sam Long, and he was now starting to eat into Yuri's time up front, and he was taking one person after another, but only found out late into the run that he had that penalty to serve, but used it to pump up the crowd and didn't get frustrated, took his time, refreshed himself, and got going right away. Retook the people who he'd just overtaken, and he was back flying again, trying to get as close as he could to Youri, just in case Youri blew up, because literally anything can happen in these races. And as we saw, Youri was literally seconds away, it seems, from blowing up. He finished a minute 37 up on Sam, but it seems like he couldn't have taken one more step. They had to really take care of him afterwards, get him into a wheelchair. They took him into the med tent where they said they got oxygen onto him. They put him in an ice bath. He eventually had an IV drip and was taken to hospital. Sam Long, on the other hand, was a completely different story. He tried to slam dunk the finish arch and was just chatting with everybody after the race. Peter Hemrick pulled off another phenomenal performance here to take third place, just another minute behind Sam Long. And then, perhaps the surprise of the day, David McNamee, who said he shocked himself, ran his way into fourth place after having the 12th fastest swim and the 12th fastest bike, but the second fastest run overall landed him in fourth, overtaking Kyle Smith and Mika Nu right at the end. Mika Nu was in fourth, but faded to sixth right in the death as he kind of blew up again on the run like he did last year. Kyle Smith faded a little bit, but had a fantastic overall race as the second ranked wild card in this one. And then Aaron Royal rounded it out at seventh, and Kasper Stepaniak another wild card in this eighth. So 4 wild cards. It was the wild card show as Yuri Kulon moved into first place in this T100 tour. And with this result, he is going to get so many PTO points, because last year Christian Blumenfeld picked up over 99 points for his result. So clearly Youri is going to fly up the rankings, perhaps moving up into 4th or 5th or 6th in the world. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for Youri. He is going to do whatever it takes, and he believes he can win this T100 series. Youri has messaged me saying we are going to do a podcast about this. I am so excited, so stay tuned for that. He is a guy who tells it as it is, and that is going to be one heck of a story to listen to. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and we'll see you guys in the next one.